Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another segment of our learning journey. If you haven't already, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Creating this content takes a great deal of time, and your support, primarily through likes, sends a clear message that you value this work and want to see more of it. I promise to continually improve the quality of what I deliver to you. I want to take you back in time, a time when children worried that their names would not appear in the Jamaica Gleaner. I remembered my time back at Barracks Road Primary School in Jamaica and those extra lessons. My committed teacher did not charge for these lessons. She just wanted us to be successful. While I did pass the common entrance examination, I did not get my first choice. But as luck would have it, I was placed in the right space. So this session, we will revisit the Jamaican Common Entrance Examination, a legacy of aspiration, stratification, and untold stories. The Common Entrance Examination was introduced in Jamaica in 1958, following policy changes implemented in 1957. It was more than just a test. It was designed to change how students moved from primary to secondary school. Before the Common Entrance Examination, going to a good government school often depended on a family's ability to pay. The exam promised to let students earn places at prestigious schools based on their own merit, regardless of how much money their parents had. At the time, Jamaica was moving toward independence, which arrived in 1962. Introducing the Common Entrance Examination fits into a larger goal of building a fairer society. By focusing on test scores instead of family income, the government hoped talented children from all backgrounds could attend top schools. However, merit itself became controversial. Because the CEE used a standardized, mostly multiple-choice format, students with access to better tutoring or extra resources often did better. In other words, even though the exam was intended to level the playing field, it sometimes widened gaps between those who could afford extra help and those who could not. Over the next 40 years, the Common Entrance Examination shaped many personal stories of students and families celebrating success or dealing with disappointment. These individual experiences reveal how the exam both opened opportunities and created new challenges. When Jamaica replaced the Common Entrance Examination in 1999, its legacy remained a mix of progress toward educational fairness and reminders of how difficult it can be to measure true potential through a single test. Before 1957, Jamaica's schools were sharply divided by class and race, a legacy of British colonial rule. Most black children attended elementary schools run by churches with little government support. These schools taught basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, along with skills meant for manual labor. Boys learned trades and girls learned domestic tasks. The goal was to prepare them for low-paying jobs on plantations or in domestic service, rather than for higher learning. Meanwhile, only a tiny number of privileged students, children of wealthy families, colonial officials, and expatriates, could attend the few government-backed grammar schools or private high schools. These secondary schools followed British-style curricula aimed at exams like the Cambridge University tests and prepared students for university study abroad or colonial administration jobs. In 1900, fewer than 1,400 students in all of Jamaica were in high school. By the 1950s, that number had only risen to around 10,000, still under 1% of the eligible population. Admission to these high schools depended on individual entrance exams and the ability to pay substantial fees. Only a handful of scholarships, 6 per year in earlier decades, rising to about 130 free places just before 1958, existed, far too few to change the overall inequality. By the 1940s and 1950s, Jamaica's move toward universal adult voting in 1944 and the introduction of elected ministers in 1953 created public pressure for fairer opportunities. Education was seen as a key path to social progress, but the stark gaps in access made it clear that a new, more equitable system was needed, setting the scene for the Common Entrance Examination. In 1957, Jamaica's new elected government decided to use a single exam, the Common Entrance Examination, to determine which students could attend grant-aided high schools. Dr. Ivan Lloyd, the Minister of Education, argued that the old system of individual schools holding their own entrance tests gave wealthy families an unfair advantage. Instead, the Common Entrance Examination would allow students to earn places on merit only, regardless of their parents' income. The first common entrance examination took place in 1958. It tested students in mathematics, English, and mental ability using multiple choice questions. Children were allowed up to 3 attempts to pass, which could help those whose academic development was slower. At first, Jamaica used British standard tests called the Moray House tests. In 1962, the ministry began designing its own versions of the common entrance examination. This shift happened during major social changes. In 1944, all adults gained the right to vote, and by 1959, most government decisions were made by Jamaicans instead of colonial officials. As the economy grew, especially through industries like bauxite and manufacturing, the government had more resources to invest in education. However, the common entrance examination did not create new spots in high schools. It only chose which students would fill the existing places. If more students passed the exam than there were seats in the most sought after schools, some children still could not gain admission. Focusing on multiple choice skills also led primary schools to emphasize test preparation over broader learning. Finally, giving students 3 chances stretched exam pressure over several years, causing stress and early labeling of some children. Although the common entrance examination was intended to make access to secondary education fairer, its design and the limited number of high school places meant it did not fully achieve that goal. Introducing the common entrance examination changed primary school life into a high pressure period for students and families. For over 40 years, this single exam determined who could go to secondary school. Many children began intense preparation early, some say as young as kindergarten, and extra lessons or private tutoring became common as parents sought every advantage. On exam day, anxiety ran so high that some students suffered nightmares or extreme stress, and all results were published publicly, making success or failure visible to everyone. Once the exam was over, student scores became the basis for government scholarships, free places, and grant-in-aid spots. Yet there were far more applicants than available seats. For example, roughly 50,000 students might compete for about 13,000 places, meaning passing depended not only on one's score, but on how many others did equally well. In practice, merit was relative. Only the top scorers up to the number of openings gained admission. A major issue emerged almost immediately. Students at fee-paying preparatory schools succeeded at much higher rates than those at government primary schools. In 1961, preparatory school pupils won more than half of the free places, even though they were far fewer in number. A preparatory school student had about a 1 in 4 chance of a free place, while a primary school student had about a 1 in 86 chance. Data from early studies confirmed that this gap reflected differences in resources, teaching quality, and exam preparation. Rather than leveling the field, the examination system reinforced a two-tiered structure, favoring children from more affluent backgrounds. In the early 1960s, it became clear that the common entrance examination alone did not give equal chances to all students. Many children from public primary schools were at a serious disadvantage compared to students from fee-paying preparatory schools. To address this, Edwin Allen, the Minister of Education after the 1962 elections, introduced a 70-30 policy. Under this rule, 70% of the free places in government-aided high schools were reserved for students who attended public primary schools and met the minimum standard on the common entrance examination. The remaining 30% of places went to students from private preparatory schools. This quota system signaled that simply relying on test scores, merit only, was not enough to overcome the problem of uneven resources and support. By reserving most spots for public primary students, the government aimed to give more children from less wealthy backgrounds a fair shot at good secondary schools. However, this also created controversy. Some high-scoring preparatory school students worried they might lose their place in a top school to a public primary student with a lower score. In this way, the policy tried to correct one form of unfairness but led to new complaints about fairness from other families. Another consequence of the common entrance examination era was how quickly children were labeled bright or failures. Because the exam results were published for everyone to see, students who did not earn a place at a prestigious high school often felt shame or disappointment. These labels could affect how teachers, classmates, and even family members treated them. For many children, the emotional stress and public attention around the exam left lasting memories, adding a human side to the debate over exam scores and school quotas. The Common Entrance Examination left a complex legacy in Jamaica. On one hand, it did create real opportunities for children from poorer families to attend prestigious high schools, since free places were awarded based on exam results rather than parental income. For many students from lower socio-economic backgrounds, the examination opened doors that had previously been closed because of high school fees. However, socio-economic status still played a major role. A 1975 study by Marlene Hamilton looked at 574 Jamaican high school students and compared their common entrance examination results with their later General Certificate of Education ordinary level results. The study found that, especially among boys in cities, family wealth and resources mattered more for doing well on the O-level exams than simply having passed the common entrance examination. For example, some upper-class boys who failed the common entrance examination still took many O-level subjects and performed well, often because they could afford extra tutoring, repeat a year in a well-resourced environment, or receive special placements at private schools. Upper-class girls who passed the common entrance examination tended to have the highest average O-level grades, again showing that passing helped, but that family resources provided additional support. In other words, although passing the common entrance examination generally predicted better O-level performance, students from wealthier families had safety nets that allowed them to succeed even if they did not do well initially. About 5% of secondary school entrants gained admission at a principal's discretion, which tended to favor those with connections or the means to secure such placements. These factors meant that merit on the common entrance examination was never completely separate from economic advantage. As a result, while the examination did help some children move up socially, it also reinforced existing divides by giving families with money and resources extra paths to success. The common entrance examination profoundly affected Jamaican students, families, and the education system. Children faced severe stress, nightmares, anxiety, and even common entrance neuroses as they prepared for a test that could determine their futures. In one tragic case, a 12-year-old boy took his own life after failing the exam. Parents and communities amplified the pressure by publicizing results, making exam outcomes a source of pride or shame. Teachers responded by teaching to the test, focusing almost exclusively on mathematics, English, and mental ability, often from early grades. This narrowed the primary curriculum, sidelining subjects like art, physical education, and social studies. Families with financial means paid for extra tutoring, creating a shadow education system that disadvantaged less affluent children and undermined the ideal of merit-based selection. Up to 3 exam attempts prolonged the ordeal, labeling children as bright or failures and affecting their self-esteem and social treatment. By 1999, Jamaica replaced the common entrance examination with the Grade 6 achievement test, aiming to place every student in a secondary institution. However, competition for top schools persisted and stress levels remained high. In 2019, the primary exit profile shifted toward continuous assessment and critical thinking, but still ranked students by composite scores and parental choices. As long as certain high schools are seen as far superior, any single placement exam will continue to generate anxiety, inequalities, and a narrow focus on test preparation. The personal stories from the common entrance examination era show how deeply the exam affected children, families, and communities. Many students remember persistent nightmares, loss of appetite, and overwhelming fear before the exam. One 12-year-old boy tragically took his own life after failing. Some families even referred to common entrance neuroses to describe the widespread anxiety among students and parents. Preparing often began years in advance, making childhood feel consumed by a single test. Students who missed their first attempt sometimes faced harsh punishment at home. Even passing could feel bittersweet. Being admitted to a second-best school instead of the top choice still caused deep disappointment. Those who did enter traditional high schools often felt lucky, but carried the memory of earlier stress. Children who did not gain places at prestigious schools were funneled into non-traditional secondary institutions, junior, technical, or vocational schools, viewed as for underachievers. These schools frequently lacked resources, and many students struggled with costs for books, uniforms, and transport. Still, some, like a GSAT-era student placed at Papine High, resolved to grow wherever I was planted, showing remarkable resilience. Families experienced intense pressure. Parents worried about reputation, neighbors judged placements, and extra tutoring created financial strains. Results published in newspapers made success or failure a public matter, affecting community status. Urban students, especially from wealthier backgrounds, often had better access to test preparation, while rural children faced additional challenges. Gender also played a role. Girls from poorer families sometimes secured places more frequently, while boys from wealthier households could rely on private tutoring or repeat years if they failed. Overall, these untold stories reveal that the Common Entrance Examination was far more than a selection test. It shaped identities, family dynamics, and life trajectories for generations of Jamaican children. The Common Entrance Examination was introduced in 1957-58 to make secondary school admission based on merit rather than family income. For many students from lower income families, it did open doors that had previously been closed by high fees. Yet, because only a limited number of spots existed in the most prestigious schools, the exam reinforced a tiered system. Attending a brand name institution became a major social marker. Wealthier families still had advantages through private tutoring, repeat years, or discretionary placements, so the exam often reflected existing inequalities rather than eliminating them. Beyond social divisions, the examination created intense test culture. Children and parents experienced high anxiety, and schools narrowed their teaching to focus on exam subjects, sidelining broader learning. Many students suffered stress, and some families made significant financial sacrifices for extra lessons. These hidden human costs, stories of pressure, triumph, and disappointment, reveal how a policy intended to promote fairness sometimes caused trauma. Subsequent reforms, the Grade 6 Achievement Test in 1999 and the Primary Exit Profile in 2019, tried to address these issues by assessing more subjects and using continuous evaluation. Yet, as long as some secondary schools are viewed as far superior, any national placement exam will remain high stakes. Lasting change will require rethinking school hierarchies, redistributing resources, and moving toward more holistic assessments that support all students' learning and well-being. Thanks for watching, and please share. We are on this learning journey together.